welcome or welcome back to Life on the French. Today is Friday, so we're going to be talking about free speech because it's Free Speech Friday. So this week I wanted to talk about graduation speeches, plural. There's one in the news in particular. The first report I read about it was on June 2nd. But I wanted to make it into its own video because it's kind of an interesting topic. But a valedictorian of a high school in Texas scrapped her pre-approved speech to talk about the recent passing of the anti-abortion bill that was signed into law in Texas. Her position of the speech basically argued for bodily autonomy, talking about how women like her have been working their whole lives towards building this future, and to see that it would all be taken away if a contraceptive didn't work makes her wonder why, planning for this big future and having a career is worth it. And in response, it was a very moving speech. It got a lot of media attention. It was retweeted by a number of celebrities. So the speech kind of went viral. And I think what really interests me, and if you want to watch the speech, because I'm not going to go too much into the speech itself, I will have multiple articles listed below. One of them includes a video so you can watch the speech. The other ones include the text of the speech, as well as more information about the recent heartbeat bill that was passed in Texas. But what I wanted to focus on was the impact that the speech had. So obviously it drew a lot of media attention. It was very easy for me to find 3 articles about it. It's in a number of other places. It's being, retweeted on Twitter by major celebrities who have big followings. So this one high school student's speech is being heard by a large population of the United States. Whether or not you agree with the speech itself or not, I think what it is indicative of is that students can have something that people want to listen to, have something to say that people want to hear, and about politics, and that, a singular voice can make a difference. The school chose not to follow their policy of, if a speech goes off of the pre-approved speech, shutting off the microphone. They left the microphone on so she could finish her speech. And if they had cut it off, we wouldn't have seen what she had to say. I mean, it still would have been a free speech news report, I'm sure. It would have been interesting to people like me, to debate about, the importance of students having voices. But her point, the student's point, wouldn't have gotten across to her high school. It wouldn't have been reported on by CBS and Associated Press, and it wouldn't have gone, kind of viral on Twitter. And she wanted, her political views heard, and they have been in a major way. The speech itself, I find it to be quite eloquent and informed. And I think it just goes to show that if you give students the opportunity to talk about politics, and share their ideas. They often have ideas worth sharing. If it had been this like subpar speech, I don't think it would have gotten the media attention the way that it did. Now, this really wouldn't be a Free Speech Friday if I only gave you like one piece of news. I want to talk about this as a broader topic. So, a few years ago, and again, I will list all of the links in the description down below. I believe it was in 2018, two teenagers from a Catholic high school were denied the ability to speak at commencement. The student president, as well as the valedictorian, because their speeches did not align to the morals of the school or the philosophy of the school. So they were told that they could not speak. It wasn't stated in the articles that I read whether they were given the opportunity to modify their speeches, but it seems like their core ideas were so counter to what the school wanted to teach students that they just banned them from speaking. And they were informed like the Friday before the ceremony that they weren't going to be able to talk. So this upset their parents, but the students weren't going to be silent. And so what they did was, after graduation, they got bullhorns and gave their speeches outside of the graduation center, so that, you know, people who wanted to listen could listen. And so many of their fellow students and their families stayed to listen to their speeches. And again, this gained widespread press. You know, the text of their speeches I couldn't exactly find, but it seemed to be the quotes that were there that I read were about how it's important for the youth to, you know, use their voice to advocate for what they believe is morally right and to do what's morally right. And I just find this very ironic that the Catholic school like barred it. But one of the students was openly gay. Both students were known for being kind of social activists. But their speeches seemed to be less about a specific policy and more about the youth needing to, you know, advocate for justice and how the youth are going to be the future. And that sometimes the youth have, you know, one of the quotes goes something like, age doesn't always correlate to wisdom. I think that's true. And he says, you know, we also have important things to say and new ideas to bring. And he says his reasoning is that young people's minds have not been desensitized to the world around us or to the cruelties around us. And I think that's probably true. A lot of what we do that's wrong can be things that we've always done. And once you're desensitized to the wrong things that we do, or traditions that we have that aren't exactly fair, you know, you kind of become blind to it if you're not directly affected by it. And so I do think that speech had a good point. Funnily enough, both talked about abortion, but this student, you know, gave praise to students who went to a pro-life march. in January of that year. Mostly, I don't know what his stance is on abortion, but it just seemed like he wanted people to advocate for the beliefs that they have. And to fight for them. And going to a protest for something you support is one way to do that. Or a march. But like I said, in one case the school decided to censor it, in the other case they did not. Now, the school in Texas did consider withholding the diploma of the student. They ultimately didn't, so she has her diploma. But can you imagine that being the reason you don't get a diploma, is because you shared a political opinion? Now, what do the courts have to say about, students' rights to give speeches at school-sponsored events? If you've watched my videos before, I talked about this category of speech that's called school-sponsored. So school-sponsored speech is speech that would bear the imprimatur of the school, or people might think it represents the school's viewpoint. And because the school hosts graduation, this would kind of fall into school-sponsored speech. So they do have the right to censor the speech, or to punish people for their speech, if they so choose. They don't have to, but they could. Because they're providing the microphone, they're providing the platform, it's on their stage. The school chose the speakers, except for valedictorians who earned that spot through merit, but the school can choose whether or not to give a valedictorian speech. My school did not have a valedictorian speech. So, the school chooses the speeches and the speakers, and so it is school-sponsored. They do have the right to censor that more. I just don't think they should. And I think both of these cases are examples of why. Now, is every graduation speech ever made changing lives of people everywhere or going to go viral? No, but I do think that sometimes students, when given the freedom to talk about issues they care about, it would happen more frequently, rather than the generic cookie-cutter speeches that are often approved by schools. And I think it would be a good opportunity for students to share their opinions with at least their town. Now, again, going back to the courts, it's time for me to put on my glasses and do a little bit of quick history, quick facts, about graduation speeches. So, time for glare. Now, the school-sponsored speech that I talked about, that's Hazelwood. We've talked about that a number of times on this channel, where the court upheld the censorship of a school newspaper because it was representing the school, even though it was clearly written by individual students. But focusing on graduation speeches, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals in Cole v. Oroville Union High School District, 2000, upheld a decision by high school officials in California rejecting a proposed student prayer and a proposed student speech at graduation ceremonies because both the prayer and speech were attempts to proselytize that would involve this, violating the Establishment Clause, because the school is sponsoring the speech is, religious, so A to B to C, A to C, right? School to religion. Now, this is obviously different from political speeches. Now, obviously, abortion involves religion for a lot of people, but this speech did not contain any statements about what people should do as individuals. It was made with I statements about what the student personally believes. Obviously, it was trying to say that the heartbeat bill, shouldn't have passed and should be over. A new bill should be put in place. But it wasn't trying to say you need to be a Christian or leading a Christian prayer or leading an atheist prayer. I mean, you can be Christian and pro-life or pro-choice. Similarly, in 2003, another court case in the Ninth Circuit banned the graduating speech of a valedictorian because it was proselytizing. But they were able to give a modified version of the speech and distribute his uncensored speech outside of the graduation site. So similar to the bullhorn thing, outside of the graduation site, it is no longer school sponsored. So students have way more reign outside of the actual ceremony itself. So to kind of muddy the waters here, in the 11th Circuit, in 2001, Adler v. Duval County School Board, they upheld a procedure which allowed students to decide whether an opening speech and prayer would be given at a graduation ceremony. And so this opened the door for, religion in schools and by extension speech in schools, right? Because the students are getting a say in what happens at their ceremony. What we can glean from this is that schools that do have school prayer or bring in a pastor or a student-led prayer or a student that talks about, promoting a religion can get into trouble. Depending on the district that they're in, it's a very debatable subject. It is not clear at all what the rules are. But what we do know is that student speech is being censored in high school sometimes, their graduation speeches. I'm very glad the school in Texas allowed the speech and allowed the diploma. I think more schools should just give more opportunities in general for students to advocate for their political views. But until that happens, this is why we need First Amendment protections from the court and for schools to be aware of them. And why I, do this every Friday, because I just think that there is not enough attention being paid to student speech rights or speech rights in general by either political party. And it is one of the fundamental aspects of democracy. And it's important that we pay attention to things that are currently happening, as well as looking for guidance from the courts and looking at past examples and trying to make meaning from them. So, I hope you found this update about graduation speeches interesting and the history of censoring them and, the court decisions. Informative. If you did, give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more videos like this one, you can click subscribe and ding the bell button to know when we post. We post about free speech every Friday, but we post every day about different topics. And most importantly, I hope you have a wonderful day. And if you are graduating this year, cheers to you. Congratulations. And I hope you have a wonderful future. And I'm excited for you for your next phase in life, whatever that is. Bye. I can't see.